Okay, so I have done 20 rows of the cuff, and I've actually done the first row of the leg too. There we go. So basically, oops, I accidentally marked that. Undo count. There we go. So if you do that on this app, this is the County app. You can. I have an Android phone, so I'm sure it's on Apple and all that. Yeah, just go through the settings and undo count, and that'll undo the account that you just. That'll undo the count you just did. So there we go. So for the leg of this, I am just doing a straight stockinette stitch. So I am just going straight across and trying not to move my thing here. There we go. It's all wrapped around. There we go. It's probably the most frustrating part about doing it in this method is that the trying to get the cord trying to get the cord to do what you want it to do. So this part's pretty easy here. Oh, gosh. I'm gonna move my knitting over to the side because I knit with my right hand, so having it on the left is a little messy. So bringing over that stitch marker. All right, so I'm just going straight across. So just a knit now. No more purling, just knitting straight across all the way around. Right, and now this part, you flip it over like that, bringing this all the way through, like that. Now, I'm going to push this cord this way. I would like it to be near the end. Now I'll pull this nice and long, and back to knitting. Okay, so now I'm pulling this all the way through, and I'm going to move it closer to this one over here so it's nice and tight, pushing the orange sock, the orange marked sock, all the way through to the end of the needle, making sure I have lots of cord left. And I'm starting on the second sock, same sort of deal. So yes. All right. So one thing I realized, I think I realized this last night. Yes, last night I realized this. So I got a whole new set of circular needles in yesterday, or the day before actually. I got a whole new set of knitting needles in, circular knitting needles, 48 inches, nice and long. I think this one is a 40 inch. I kind of wish it was 48 inch. It's a little too short. So I got a whole set of 48 inch knitting needles in lots of different sizes, from like a size 0, US size. I think that's a 2.0 millimeter size, all the way up to, oh gosh, I don't even remember the highest size. I think it was like a size 10 US. I don't know what that is in millimeters. As I was going through that, going through the smaller ones, because the smaller ones are really what I'm going to use the most, because that's what I use for sock knitting. And I saw these socks are supposed to be knit with a size 1 needle, US, and I believe that is size either 2.5 millimeters or 2.75 millimeters. I'd have to look it up real quick to check. But I actually did not know what size these needles were, and I assumed that they were size 1. I did measure them, but it's kind of hard to, you know, to lay the needles down on a ruler and see how many millimeters the diameter of the needles are. So I wasn't sure the size, but it looked like it could be a size 1. So that's what I was proceeding with, were that these were a size 1. And this pattern is for using a size 1. But I did, since this is for my younger daughter, I ended up using the bigger size for her because she likes her socks to be a little bit bigger. But as I was knitting this, it seemed to just be just a little bit too big for her, not as big as I thought it was going to be. So I was quite surprised by that. And last night is when I realized why this one is a little snugger than I initially thought. And that's because I believe that these needles are actually a size 0. Because the size 1 needles that I got the other day are a little bit bigger, and the size 0 needles are pretty much the same size as this. So I'm pretty sure these are size 0. They don't have a size on them, and I was trying to figure out what they were, and I'm sure I knew in the past because I used to knit socks all the time, and I lost a lot of my knitting needles and all that, and this doesn't have a size listed on it, so I really didn't know what size it was. Now what I should have done was knit out like a square just to see the gauge of this, to see if it was the correct gauge, but I didn't do that. I assumed that these were size 1s, but they are actually size 0. So that was my mistake, but it's okay because it kind of works out so that these socks aren't as big as I thought they were going to be on her. And when I do my middle daughter's pair of socks, I'm going to use one of my new size 1 needles. Alright, so I've made it to the end of this sock. So we've finished that row, and now I can mark that, and there we go. So I'm going to do another, I think the leg I'm going to have be 20 rows, just like the cuff was. And when I'm finished doing the 20 rows, we will come back and we'll start doing the heel flap. Alright, see you in a second. Okay, so we've got 20 rows completed on Bridget's sock for the leg here. So now it's time to work on the heel flap. And I'm gonna exit out of this. And as you can see, I did add on Rain's socks. That's my daughter, Rhiannon. And I actually started hers right here. I got my new needles in, and actually, a little bit of a story about this. I started working on hers, and I was using a size 1.5 needle, which is 2.75 millimeters, I think, or 2.5. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But anyway, I got like 5 rows in, and I accidentally left it on the couch, and one of my kids sat on it, and because these are wooden needles, the needle broke in half. So, I mean, it was my own fault. I left it there. But, so I had to replace it with the size 1 needle, and I believe, because I think 2.5 millimeters is a size 1.5. So this was a 2.25. So that's a size 1. So I did replace that. So the top 5 stitches might be a little bigger than the rest of the sock, but yeah, it shouldn't really cause too much issues. But you know, I thought I'd mention that I did have a little bit of an issue there. So, all right. So now we're gonna start the heel flap. So we've got 20 rows in. So I'm gonna move this over to the end. See, I wish I could have a whole pack of the metal needles like these, because then these don't break, but they're a lot more expensive. So it was a lot cheaper to get a big pack of these wooden ones than to get metal ones. But anyway, so for the heel flap, what we need to do is we're working on the teal sock right now. And let me get this situated here. Pull this through so I have a nice long needle to work with. All right, so we're gonna start the heel flap. So what we do with that, we slip the first stitch and knit the second stitch. Let me get my yarn ready here. And there we go. And slip the next stitch and knit the next stitch. So slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, all the way to the end of the 30 stitches. And this is basically half of the amount that you cast on. The heel flap goes half of what you cast on. So I cast on 60 stitches, so the heel flap will be 30 stitches. So slip, knit all the way across. Let me double check that I'm doing it correct. So slip, knit, 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 slip. All right, so slip and then knit. All right, so I'm gonna pull that through and turn the work. So on the back part, what you need to do is basically, let's get this situated here. Oh wait, I started to pull this through as if I was going to work the back row, but you're not actually going to work the back row. You're actually going to go, you're turning the work and working on this row again. So you're not actually, like before we would finish this row and then start working on this row. That's why I automatically started to weave this through here as if I was going to start knitting on this back row here. But we don't want to do that because that would be a circular knit. We want to go back on this same needle, the same row that we were just working on. So let me adjust that again. And pull this nice and through. All right, so yarn in the front now. And we are going to slip the first slip the first stitch, and then purl across. We're not doing a slip, purl. We are slipping and then purling across, okay? Okay, so we've reached the end of that one. Now we are back at the beginning here. And now what we're going to do on the next sock, let me get the yarn in position here. So what we're going to do now is, since we're on the back side of this orange sock now, we are going to slip one and then purl across. So what this causes is there's a very slight difference between the two socks. As you can see, there's one extra row for the green sock than there is an orange sock, because we have to start on the back end of this, whereas this one we started on the front and then did the back. So now we're basically at, once we get to the end of this sock, that's when we're at the beginning of the two socks, basically. So when you knit two at a time, while it does make it you know, it makes it easier because you don't suffer from the second sock syndrome, and you can have a lot of the same tension. What it does cause is one sock will have one extra row in the heel flap, but at the end of the day, that one extra row does not make a difference at all. So let's do the purl row of the orange sock. So the first one is slipping and then purling. Let me get my yarn on the correct side here. Slip and then purl. And then we are going to purl across. All right. All right, and now we are on the last stitch here and turn the work. Okay. So there we go. Now we're on the front side again of the heel flap. So for this row, it's just like the first row that we did on here, except it's the second row for the orange sock, and we will be slip and then knitting. Slip, knit all the way across. So slip the first stitch, knit the second, slip, knit, slip, knit. All right, so we're on the last one. All right, so at this point, both of these have 2 rows. It's just that, so it's the same amount of rows. It's just that for the green sock, the teal sock, it starts on a knit row, whereas this one started on a purl row. So it's the same amount of stitches. It's just, you know, there's an opposite side there. So now that we're in the middle here, that is 1 row. So I'm going to create a new project here. And I'm going to write Bridget's socks, and this is going to be heel. Okay, so the heel is a combination of 2 rows. It is, so let's adjust this. Counter settings. So the pattern repeat is 2 rows. So 2 row repeat. And then there we go, and then click back. So it shows it down here, pattern repeat 2. So we do the first row and the second row. And now we're going, I'm going to mark when I finish 1 sock, and then mark again for the second sock. So that's basically 2 rows for each sock. So there we go. So if I press this again, it'll say 1 because it'll be the next row. So I'm actually going to undo that count. So we've completed 2 rows. Now we've got to do the next one. So same thing, when you're on the front of the heel, front of the sock, it is the slip and knit, slip knit all the way across. And then when you turn it and you're on the back side, it is slip the first stitch and then purl across. So there we go. All right, so I'm going to do the heel flap for a total of 10 rows, combinations. So it's actually going to be 20 rows because it's 10, a repeat of rows 1 and 2 10 times. So that'll be 20 rows. So that seems to be the theme that we're going with. We did 20 rows for the cuff, 20 rows for the leg. Now I'm going to be doing 20 full rows for the heel flap. All right, so I will see you after the heel flap. Okay, so I have done 10 repeats of these 2 rows. So now the next part of the sock is doing the heel turn. So this is what makes it turned the other way. So this part here is the heel flap is the back, is where your heel, the back of your heel is against. And then it's going to do the heel turn, which makes it go from the length of the sock to the foot. All right, so basically, you know, I don't have the formula on the top of my head for how this is kind of done, but I think it's you take half of the row plus 2 more stitches, and so this is this row is 30 stitches, and you see this is a flap. The other part is because we were going back and forth in the flap here, so we have this separate from the rest of the sock here. So there are 30 stitches on this, so half of that is 15 plus 2 more is 17. So you have to do each heel, the heel turn for each sock separately. So we'll do just the heel turn for this sock first, the teal sock, and then we will do the heel turn for the orange sock. All right, so we're knitting 17 stitches. That is half of the row plus 2 more. So let's see. All right, so I have knit half of the row plus 2 more stitches, so that was 17 stitches. And now the next thing you do is you slip, slip, and then knit those 2 slip stitches together. So like that, and take off. There we go. And then you turn the heel. Even though there's this many stitches still on the other needle, you're going to turn the work and start doing the other side now. So on the other side, you purl, you slip the first stitch, purl 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then purl 2 together. There we go, and then turn it back the other way. All right, so we've turned back the other way now. Okay, so it's basically created a gap on both sides. There's a gap here and there's a gap right here. So now that it's switched to the other side, so you knit to 1 stitch right before the gap. The gap is right here because that's where we turned and started knitting the other way, or purling the other way. So it's slipping the first stitch and then knitting to the stitch right before the gap. All right, so we're at the stitch right before the gap, and now we are going to slip, slip, and then knit those 2 together. There we go. And now turning again. And then on this side, we're going to slip the first stitch, and then purl to 1 before the gap, and then purling the 2 together. So we're 1 before the gap, and now I'm going to purl 2 together, and that's basically closing the gap. But then we create a new gap when we turn it back around. Kind of just goes back and forth, back and forth. All right, so we're doing the same thing here, slipping, then knitting to 1 before the gap, then slip, slip, knitting gap closed, turning, slipping, then purling to one before the gap, and then purling the two stitches together, and then turning again. So back and forth until all the stitches that are on the cables that's left over are used up. We're basically going through all of these stitches one by one. All right. Okay, so I've made it to the end of this heel turn for the teal sock. I took the thing off of it just because it was kind of a hassle during the heel turn here. So as you can see, all those short rows, what they did was they caused the sock itself to turn like a 90-degree angle here. So now it's going from the leg of the sock, and then it will go to the foot. All right, so now I have to move over to the other sock, and I will put this marker back on here so I don't forget it. I'm just gonna put it randomly in there. All right, so now we're gonna move over to the orange sock, and we're gonna start this sock on the purl side. So we're gonna slip the first stitch first though. Slip the first stitch and then purl across all the way. Okay, so now we're on the right side again, and basically we're doing the exact same thing we just did with the teal sock. We are slipping the first stitch and knitting so that we have 17 stitches on one side. All right, so here we go for the heel turn for the orange sock.